All right, and we're moving on to lesson 5 in unit 7 here on page 73. And once again, you're going to see a lot of the same conversation that we've talked about with our unit on congruency and triangles so far, but today we're going to work with multiple triangles. Okay, so if you look at standard 16.4, I can show that triangles or their corresponding points are congruent in context involving more than one pair of triangles. So typically what this means is that we're going to have an objective, right? We're going to try to prove something congruent. All right, and what that means is that we might have to prove one pair of triangles congruent to get the information needed, then to move on to maybe either get a second triangle congruent or parts of those triangles. All right, so here's what I want you to do. All right, so I want you to try the opener here, and it kind of guides you a little bit, all right, with the 4 questions here about what you need to do. Now, I'm going to add on to this is that once again, right, there's a lot going to happen in this picture with what you're trying to do. All right, so what I want you to do, if it's helpful, is redraw, all right, some of the triangles that you need. So for example, this is your goal, right, that you want to prove that triangle GDE is congruent to BJE. So maybe you want to draw those separately on a separate sheet and then add information to it as you go through the problem. But I'll leave that up to you, and I'll show you how I approached it once you're finished. All right, so let's go through the problem here. So now, all right, so our goal, and I'm just going to highlight our goal here, is to prove that GDE, which is down here, right, is congruent to BJE, which is this triangle up here. So we want to prove that those two triangles are congruent. Now, all right, we saw this type of picture, and I think this exact same picture and the same information in a prior lesson. So E is the midpoint of AC and DB. So that means that AE, right here, is congruent to EC, and that means that DE, and that's great because that gives us 2 sides, all right, a pair of sides in each of those triangles that we want that are equal or congruent to each other. All right, so now here's our goal, right, is that we want to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent. So now when I look, I can also get that this angle right here is congruent to this angle right here because they're vertical angles. So now, all right, I've got angle and a side, right, an angle and a side. So I either need side here because I could go side, angle, side, or I need these angles here because then I could go angle, side, angle, or maybe these angles, right, because then I can go angle, angle, side. So this is where then we want to kind of look at, we have to kind of go back and forth between kind of the bigger picture and the smaller picture of what we're trying to do. All right, so what is the first pair of triangles that you can show are congruent with our information? All right, and what that would be, all right, are the larger triangles, right? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to, if I look at this, and I'm just going to draw this picture here, like this. Not exactly to scale, but if we look here, we have A, D, E, and we have B, E, C here, right? Move that up so you can see it, right? And we know we already had these guys, right? But now, once again, if I ignore the middle here, just look at these 2 large triangles, I can see that I have a larger pair of vertical angles here, correct? So I can see that I can get these 2 big triangles right here, ADE, right, and CBE congruent by side, angle, side, okay? And so that's what I mean by kind of going back and forth. So you kind of have to have the big picture, find what you can, and then go back to the little picture. So we can go triangle, AED, oh, that's not an A, that's a D. So how about AED is congruent to triangle AED would be CEB. And so which shortcut can we use? Well, we can see that we can use side, angle, side here, correct? Now, when I look, all right, so what parts of triangle GDE and BJE are congruent given the triangles you proved in in part 1 here. So now when I look, right, so here's the big, right, and here's the small, right? And so when I look, right, now I can see that this angle B is this angle B here, right? And I can see that the angle D here is this angle D here. So since these 2 triangles are congruent, I know that any pair of corresponding parts will also be congruent. So I know that angle D and angle B will also be congruent. And so notice now I can throw that into my smaller picture up here. And that gives me, all right, what I want here. So there's that angle, side, angle, right? So I can get angle D congruent to angle B, right? And then that gives us angle, side, angle. All right, so this is where, all right, you just have to use the full skill set, all right, of what makes it easier for you to interpret the picture, right? So for some people, this isn't overwhelming, and you can kind of visually break things apart, right, in your mind. But if you can't, right, the fail-safe is redraw some things, right? Maybe draw the 2 or 3 different sets of triangles you're working with. All right. So when we think about notes on dealing with this, right? Okay. All right. Some strategies, right? Okay. All right. So I always want to keep the end in mind. Keep the end in mind, right? So as we work, I'm always thinking, what am I trying to achieve, right? And where are those pieces? Okay. All right, so keep the end in mind. What am I trying to go through here? What am I trying to get to? So, this is my end goal. So I have to always keep that in mind as I'm working, because I could have said that these 2 angles were congruent, right? I could have gotten some other information, but that doesn't really help me. All right, so we want to make sure that you don't have this really, really long process that doesn't really get you where you want to be. All right, so keep the end in mind. All right, okay, and then what you want to do is, all right, so find some congruent triangles. All right, so find congruent triangles. All right, and then what we want to do is then we want to find congruent parts. All right, so we want to find congruent parts, all right, to move us closer to our end goal, right? All right, so that's one of the things I'm always keeping the end in mind. So what pieces of a triangle do I need? All right, so when I looked at this triangle, it's like, okay, I needed maybe GE or EJ, right? Or I needed angle D and angle B, or maybe I needed angle DGE and angle EJB, right? So I'm keeping those things in mind, right? And then once I find some congruent triangles, I want to find the congruent parts that move me closer to that, all right, end goal. All right? And don't remember that this is really all the same stuff that we've been doing. There's nothing new. All right? So there's nothing new here. All right? So, and the reason why I say that is use what you know. All right, so whether that's vertical angles, right, whether that is midpoint, whether that is parallel lines, getting those alternate to your angles, whether those are triangle shortcuts, right, there's nothing new. All right, the challenge here, right, is once again working through multiple parts, right, to get to that end. All right, okay, so let's look at, all right, one problem together here. So let's kind of look at problem 1 here. All right, okay, so we want to prove. All right, so we're given that angle YWV is congruent to YWU, and we want to prove that triangle WVZ, so WVZ, so this guy over here, all right, is congruent to WUC. So that's this guy right here. Okay, all right, so that's what we want. So that's our goal, right? And let's look at this given information here. So WYV, so WYV, all right, and that's marked for us here, all right, okay, is congruent to WYU. So we have those angles marked there. Okay, so which pair of triangles are congruent, all right, with this given information? Well, let's see what we can figure out here. All right, so when I look at this, all right, I'm going to look for some things that maybe I can use to show congruency here. So when I look at my picture here, I can see that in here, right, these 2 triangles share, all right, the 2 triangles, one here in green, they share WZ. So if they share a side, right, we know that that would be equal, right? Okay, now if I look at these triangles down here where I already have congruent angles, all right, I can see that they also share ZY. So, all right, I got a shared piece here. So for these 2 triangles, right, and I've got a shared piece here for these 2 triangles. All right, so now, and I think I misread our given here. So we already have these angles marked down here, and I thought that was what this was referring to. So I totally looked at this backwards here in my mind. So we also have YWV. So YWV would be this angle right here. All right, and YWU would be this angle right here. So I apologize for that. All right, so now, so there's all of our information. All right, so we have these 2 angles up here. We have these 2 sides down, or angles down here. We have this shared side and this shared side. All right, so our end goal, remember, is to get this triangle, right, congruent to this triangle here. So I could get this side, right, and I'd have side, angle, side. All right. I could maybe get these angles, and I'd have angle, side, angle. Or maybe an angle here and an angle here, and I'd go angle, angle, side. And so that's all kind of dependent on now, when I look at the big picture, right, when I look at the big triangles, what do I see? All right, and so when I look at the big triangles, once again, I'm going to take out the middle part here, and I see this is what I see. Let's see if you guys see this too. So I'm just going to draw this, and I'm going to look at the big triangles like this. And I can see that these angles are congruent. I can see that these angles are congruent. And then once again, I can see they share that side in the middle. So when I look at the very big picture here, all right, I can see that the larger triangles are congruent to each other. So I can see that triangle VWY is congruent to triangle VWY would be UWV, or UWY, UWY. All right, and I can see that that's by angle, side, angle. All right, so I can get those very big sides, or excuse me, very big triangles congruent. Now, when I look at my picture, then I'm looking for, once again, this is the end goal here, right? So I want something, right, in this to correlate to these in green. And what I can see is, right, this side is this side right here, and this side is this side right here, which works out really well because that was one of the pieces that I wanted to get, right? So I know that W or VW is congruent to UW, all right, and that helps me because now I know that triangle VWZ is congruent, all right, to UWZ by side, angle, side. All right, so I apologize for misreading that at the start, but hopefully that didn't throw you off too much. All right, you finish up this lesson, and I will see you next time.